Kia ora te whānau, ko Andrew Doubleday aho. Today we're looking at the Gospel text for Sunday the 18th of September. It's Luke chapter 16 verses 1 through to 13. And it's a text that I've always struggled with, and I'm kind of hoping that as I read it you'll see the tension, and it may be one that you've questioned as well. Luke chapter 16 verse 1. Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is it that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you can no longer be manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do, now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I've decided what to do, so that when I'm dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he'd acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you the true riches? And if you've not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or to be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." This, as I said, is a difficult passage. It's hard to make sense of. I'm left with all sorts of questions. Why should the rich man applaud his crooked manager for cheating him? That's the first thing. Oh, that was clever. He's kind of applauding it. He's marking it and saying, And why should the people who the manager has conspired with to cheat the master trust him in the future? Why would they welcome him into their homes? Seeing what he did to his previous boss, you'd think, I don't think I can trust this person. Why would I even think that it's an idea? And then the third question, which for me is even more troubling, why does Jesus seem to commend what's going on here? Why does he seem to commend the shrewdness of this crooked manager? I say, for years I've struggled to understand it. It seems to me that to kind of make it right, it's like you have to do some mental gymnastics to make sense of it all. I was ultimately helped by two commentators, Leon Morris and William Barclay. And they each have a different take. But the thing they have in common is they're actually looking at the first century context. First, in the Barclay narrative, the manager reduces the debt and simply uses it as a form of implied blackmail over those he's been dealing with. It's a kind of, well, I've looked after you, you need to look after me, or else. Yeah, I can see that there's some possibilities there. I prefer, though, the Leon Morris model. Morris talks about usury, and usury is the charging of interest. In the law, it was forbidden. You weren't allowed to charge interest to your fellow citizens. So there were ways of getting around it. And what he's suggesting happening here is that rather than using money where it's clear, they are trading in kind with products. So, in the example of the parable, wheat might be charged at a premium of, say, 25%. The person borrowed 80 containers of wheat and was obligated to pay back 100. And one might be charged for olive oil at 100%. One borrowed, so he might borrow 50 jugs of oil and be required to pay back 100 jugs. Now, why the difference? Well, it kind of makes sense. The differences would be on the basis of the credit worthiness of the borrower. So if you had someone who you knew was financially sound, that you could say, okay, we'll make this deal on the basis of wheat. You will borrow 80 containers and pay me back the equivalent of 100 containers. But if someone who had few resources and was in a desperate situation came, and you were not so sure that you were going to get paid out, you would charge them therefore on the basis of olive oil. Because olive oil was easy to doctor. It was easy to add stuff to it to make it go further. And so that would be the 50% premium. So that we'd charge you on the basis you borrowed 100 jugs, but you're going to have to pay, 50 jugs, but you're going to have to pay back 100 jugs. And so that's how it would work. And it was not necessarily that any oil or any wheat actually changed hands. It was simply a ruse to get around the appearance of engaging in any exploitive usury and money lending. Now, we don't know in this story whether the arrangement was set up by the rich man or by his manager. Yet it matters little. If the borrower was told he only had to repay the original debt in accordance with the law, he'd be appreciative to the manager for doing the right thing. He would think, so I'm only having to pay for the 50 jugs, or I'm only having to pay for the 80 baskets of wheat. This is what the law says. I'm being treated fairly, I'm being treated well, I'm being treated according to the law. And he would feel a sense of indebtedness to the manager for doing the right thing. That's how he would see it. Doesn't matter that the motivation of the manager was quite different. The motivation of the manager was to make sure that the debtors would all be, in the end, looking after him. It is clever. It is cunning. And the rich owner, in this case, is caught on the horns of a dilemma. Because he could hardly complain that even though he's taken a haircut, a loss, in terms of what his manager, his steward, has done on his behalf, he can't complain because he'll look like a crook. And so while he may not have appreciated the loss he's taken, he could appreciate and applaud the cunning, the way in which his former manager had looked after himself. Now, that I get. Either way, Jesus seems to applaud the lateral thinking of the manager and wishes that kingdom people put as much energy and ingenuity into furthering kingdom purposes. That, for me, is a kind of generous take on what's happening here. Also, the narrative tends to go, I'm still left a little bit uncomfortable, and I haven't been able to fully 100% resolve it within my own heart. I'm a little bit helped by Morris's suggestion that it is the astuteness of the steward, the manager, that is commended, not his commercial practices. Because he then goes on to quote another commentator, a T.W. Manson, who says, this reminds us that there is a whole world of difference between I applaud the dishonest steward because he acted cleverly and I applaud the clever steward because he acted dishonestly. Think about that for a moment. I guess it's got some strength to it. The translation of the passage by the New Living Translation and the Message are also, I think, quite helpful. They help me to get a handle on it and think, yeah, We'll probably go with that. So first, verses 8 and 9 in the New Living Translation. Now this is more of a translation. The Eugene Peterson's is more where he, in the message, he's more creative. So let's look first at the New Living Translation, which is actually a translation. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it's true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of the light. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. Okay. Is this what Jesus had in mind? Well, it could be. I like, though, the way that Eugene Peterson puts it. I say in the message, it strikes me that there's kind of something quite American about it. And you might detect that at all, because this is a country that for the last 100 years or so has very much pushed the idea of a free enterprise. And it comes through in his take. This is what he says. Now here's the surprise. The master praised the crooked manager. And why? Because he knew how to look after himself. Streetwise people are smarter in this regard than law-abiding citizens. They're on constant alert, looking for angles, surviving by their wits. I want you to be smart in the same way, but for what's right, using every adversity to stimulate you to creative survival. Let's read that again. Using every adversity to stimulate, and again. Using every adversity to stimulate you to creative survival. To concentrate your attention on the bare essentials, so you'll really live, and not complacently just get by on good behaviour. Now he raises some really good issues there, but one of them, as I said, is this kind of entrepreneurial edge that is coming through, that I would suspect, translate really well to the American mind. And we're a bit different for us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. But I like it. Is it what Jesus had in mind? Well, it's also possible. It's a different angle, but it's got something going for it. Yet in the end, let there be no confusion. Jesus is very clear. He's unequivocal in what he says next. And I think it's in the light of that you have to read all that's come before. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you've not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what's your own? No slave can serve two masters. For a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So Jesus again returns to a theme which is consistent throughout the Gospels. He reminds us that the little things matter, that integrity is found in the little things, that if we can be trusted in the little things that we imagine don't really matter, it's much more likely that we'll be trustworthy in the big things. As I said, this is a theme that he returns to on numerous occasions within the Gospels. The little things matter. Integrity is found in the little things. More than just a little challenging, I think. Hey, God bless you.